If a city has a heartbeat, Kolkata's beats loudest on College Street. The smell of old paper, wet dust, frying samosas and ink mixes into a strange perfume that only this place can make. Here, books lean out of stalls like curious listeners. Here, students argue about revolution and poetry with the energy of young gods. Here, rain falls with the confidence of someone who knows the streets will never chase it away. And above all of that, on the second floor of a quiet, cracked building, lived a woman named Agneyi, a woman who would change Varaha's world a little at a time without ever raising her voice. But that morning he didn't know her name. Not yet. He only had an address connected to a fingerprint, a single, wet fingerprint. Death speaks. Humans think they choose the people they meet. But the truth is simpler and crueler. You meet the ones your story demands. And sometimes your story wants trouble. I watched Varaha as he stood in front of the narrow staircase of Agneyi's building. He held the railing and looked up at the dim flight of steps disappearing into darkness. The rain had made the iron slippery. The smell of dampness rose from the walls. The stairway felt like a throat swallowing light. Varaha took a breath. He didn't know why he felt nervous. He wasn't the type. He had questioned murderers with calm eyes. He had walked through riots without fear. He had carried dead children out of rivers with steady hands. But this staircase, this address, this meeting, it stirred something unnamed inside him. Just a suspect, he told himself. But I knew better. This was not a suspect. This was a beginning. Up the narrow stairs. He climbed slowly. College Street noise drifted up through the windows. Students laughing, buses coughing, hawkers shouting, "Boy Deccan, sir, new edition!" Thunder rolling across the sky like a heavy drum. At the first landing, he paused. A door stood slightly open. Soft music floated out, something old, something classical, something that sounded like a memory trying to speak. He checked the number scratched on the wood. Correct flat. He knocked, once, no answer. Twice, footsteps inside. Then the door opened, and Agneyi stood there. Agneyi. She didn't look surprised to see a detective. She didn't look scared. She didn't even look curious. She simply looked calm. Her hair fell around her shoulders, dark but touched with a copper glow when the light hit it. Her eyes were amber brown, warm but sharp enough to slice through pretense. Her clothes were simple, dark kurti, loose trousers, bare feet. But something in the way she stood, quiet, alert, steady, felt old. Ancient almost, as if she had learned long ago how to hide fire inside silence. Varaha found himself clearing his throat, a thing he rarely did. "Agneyi?" She nodded gently. "I'm Detective Varaha." He lifted his ID. "May I come in?" She stepped aside without hesitation. "Of course." Her voice was low, smooth, almost too balanced. He walked inside. The room was small but warm. Books everywhere. Some stacked on the floor, some lying open on the table, some by the window, catching the weak daylight. A kettle hummed on a single-burner stove. A chessboard sat on the bed, mid-game, pieces frozen like soldiers waiting for war. And in the far corner, a canvas wrapped in cloth. His eyes paused there for half a second, enough for her to notice, but she didn't react. She only said, "Would you like some tea?" He shook his head. "No, I'm here about the robbery in Shiam Bazaar." She didn't blink. "Yes," she said. "I heard about it already." "Already?" Varaha asked. "I live near College Street, Detective," she replied softly. "News travels faster than rain here." He made a note of her calm. People who are innocent get nervous. People who are guilty get defensive. But people who know more than others, they stay calm like this. The first questions. He took out his notebook. "Agneyi, your name appeared in the visitor log of the Zamindar house last month." "I tutor their granddaughter," she said. "Literature. She likes poetry." "Poetry." He glanced at the poem from the crime scene in his notebook. "Were you at the house last night?" "No." "Can anyone confirm that?" She thought for a moment. "I was at a small reading event near Girish Park. Many people saw me." Her tone wasn't defensive. It was factual. He noted it. "Do you know the painting that was stolen? The Queen of Monsoon?" Her eyes lifted a little at the name. "I've seen it," she said. "Beautiful work, especially the brush strokes near the eyes." The painter understood rain. His brows rose. "You know art?" "Not enough to change the world," she said with a faint smile, "but enough to understand how it bleeds." He paused at that sentence. It was unusual. He moved to the next question. "Do you know anyone who might have wanted the painting stolen?" Wanting and taking are very different things, detective. You didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, a quiet, thoughtful movement, like she was considering whether the truth deserved to be spoken. There are many people in this city, she said finally, who want things that don't belong to them. He studied her face. Her eyes didn't flinch or shift. He continued, "Do you know anyone who writes poetry?" She smiled, a small, slow smile. Not happy, not mocking, just oddly understanding. Half of College Street writes poetry, detective. He couldn't help but agree. But still, he saw something in her smile. A shadow, a flame, something unspoken. A fingerprint in rain. He walked around her room. She didn't try to stop him. He checked the window, wet, rain droplets gathered on the sill. He checked the table, coffee stains, ink marks, a folded notebook. He checked the shelf, books on art, books on philosophy, books on old Bengali poetry. He checked the floor, clean, too clean. She watched him the way one watches a chess opponent, patient, without revealing anything. He moved toward the small desk by the window and picked up a book lying open. It was a book on classical Bengali paintings. But something else caught his eye. On the inside cover, a faint fingerprint, still wet. Not fresh like a second ago, but fresh enough to tell him it was touched within the last few hours. He touched it lightly with his gloved finger. Still damp from rain. Someone had handled this book after touching a wet surface. Rain, window, night. He looked at her. Expecting someone last night? No. Did someone visit? No. Did you go out? Pause, a small one, soft. Then she said, "Only to buy tea powder." He noted the hesitation. Hesitations are doors. He decided to test one more thing. He pointed to the wrapped canvas in the corner. "What's that?" She didn't even turn to look. "A friend's unfinished work. I'm keeping it safe." "May I see it?" This time, she took a breath. Only one. But deep enough that he saw her chest rise. She walked to the canvas, touched the cloth covering it, and then turned back to him. "Not now," she said gently. "It's too personal." Varaha nodded slowly. A normal suspect would say, "It's nothing," or "It's just an old painting." But she said personal, which meant she cared about it. Or maybe she cared about what he would see under the cloth. She poured 2 cups of tea anyway, and placed one in front of him, even though he had refused earlier. He didn't drink. She did. Steam curled between them, and in that steam I felt something shift. A small spark, the smallest. Humans rarely notice the moment their life changes direction. They think transformations arrive like storms. But no, they arrive like this. A fingerprint on a wet book, a wrapped canvas in a corner, a quiet woman with ember eyes pouring tea, a man who thinks he is in control, a woman who knows control is an illusion. I watched them both carefully. Varaha, trying to find truth. Agneyi, trying to hide the shape of hers. Their first meeting was not dramatic, not loud, not romantic. It was quiet, sharp, dense with unsaid things. All stories of deep connection begin like this. Not with fireworks, but with the soft closing of a door behind 2 strangers. When Varaha finally spoke, his voice was lower. "I'll ask more questions later." "I'll answer the ones I can," she replied. "You didn't ask which ones I'll ask later." She met his eyes. Some questions don't need to be asked to be answered. There it was, their first spark. Not love, not even attraction, recognition. 2 minds recognizing each other like mirrors, sharp, dangerous, curious. Varaha had walked into her life as a detective. He didn't know he would walk out changed. He put his notebook away, thanked her, and walked to the door. As he opened it, she said softly, "Detective." He looked back. "Be careful with that poem." He frowned. "Why?" She held his gaze steadily. "Because whoever wrote it," she said, "didn't steal the painting for money." Then for what? For a story. A chill ran through him, and a quiet thrill. He closed the door behind him. Little did he know. Stories that steal are the stories that ruin, and the stories that ruin are the stories that refuse to let go. Agneyi returned to her room. Varaha walked down the wet stairs into the noise of College Street, and death followed them both. The fingerprint on the book was not the only thing that was wet. Something else inside Varaha had cracked open. Something small. Something warm. Something dangerous. And that is how intimacy begins. As a question. As a suspicion. As a soft spark inside rain-soaked silence. If the first meeting between 2 people is a doorway, then the second meeting is the moment the room lights up. But between those 2 moments, there is something softer. a pause in the universe, a breath the city takes, a space where the story rearranges itself. Varaha did not know it yet, but from the moment he stepped out of Agneyi's apartment, College Street did not feel the same to him. The rain smelled sharper, the tram bells sounded clearer. The crowd noise turned into a distant hum, and somewhere in him a quiet awareness began to grow, like the first small flame inside damp wood. Humans think attraction is some thunderbolt of the heart, but that's not true. Attraction begins in the mind. A glance, a sentence, a hesitation, a moment where one soul leans forward, just a little, without permission, and it always begins in silence. That is why I enjoyed watching Varaha leave Agneyi's building. He moved slower, thinking more than he wanted to, carrying an echo of her voice in his mind. Humans call it curiosity. I call it the beginning of trouble. Rain returns to College Street. By the time Varaha reached the footpath, the sky had greyed again. Rain slid down the signboards, water collected in potholes. People rushed under shop awnings. Umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers. Varaha stood there for a moment, letting the rain fall on his shoulders while he replayed the conversation in his mind. Most suspects lie. Most suspects hide small facts. Most suspects panic. But Agneyi did none of those things. She had answered with the calmness of someone who practiced honesty, but not full honesty. A selective honesty, the kind that made him uneasy and curious, very curious. He wiped the rain from his notebook and wrote one line. Why did she say the poem is dangerous? Then he wrote a second line. Why was the book wet only on the inside cover? Then a third. What is she not telling me? He closed the notebook. College Street carried on around him. Voices, footsteps, pages turning, pens scratching, rain whispering, students arguing about a textbook price. But he didn't hear any of it. His mind was inside one small room with one quiet woman and one wet fingerprint. A return to the scene. Detectives never admit it, but they return to suspects not because they find them suspicious, but because they find them interesting. Varaha told himself he was going back because he needed answers. But I knew better. He knocked on her door again. This time the door opened before his knuckles touched it. Agneyi stood there, as if she had sensed his presence. Her hair was tied back now, her sleeves rolled up, her hands lightly stained with charcoal dust. She must have been drawing, or touching something old, something fragile. She said nothing at first, neither did he. Rain fell behind him, tea boiled behind her. The air between them held a strange warmth. Then she stepped aside. You came back, he nodded. I had more questions. She raised one eyebrow, gently amused. Questions, she said softly, or doubts. He entered the room, inside Agneyi's room again. Nothing had changed. The same books, the same chessboard, the same wrapped canvas in the corner. But something felt different. Maybe because he was looking differently now. He noticed things he hadn't before. The chessboard was mid-game. White's knight threatened black's queen. A small clay incense burner lay cold on the shelf. A scribbled note on the desk read, "Nothing belongs to us, not even time." Her handwriting, sharp, slanted, clear. He matched it in his mind with the poem left at the crime scene. Not identical, but something around the edges, the weight of the letters. The confidence, a cousin, a shadow. He couldn't ignore it. "Do you recognize this?" he asked, handing her a photograph of the poem. She looked at it. Her expression did not change, but her eyes, they softened, just for a heartbeat. "No," she said, then paused. "But it's beautiful." "Beautiful?" he asked. "A poem left after a robbery?" "Beauty doesn't choose sides," she replied calmly. He studied her face. Most people, when questioned, hide their eyes. Look at the floor. Fidget. But Agneyi held his gaze, steady as an anchor. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't even intimidated. If anything, she looked like someone evaluating him. He found that unsettling and strangely magnetic. The conversation deepens. He sat on the edge of a chair. She sat cross-legged on the floor. The rain outside thickened, hitting the window like 1,000 small drums. Varaha opened his notebook. "You said the thief didn't take the painting for money," he began. "Yes. How do you know that?" She shrugged lightly. "When someone writes a poem after a crime, they aren't thinking of money. What are they thinking of?" She tilted her head, thinking. Then she said, "Meaning. They want to make the act itself memorable. They want it to have a voice." "A voice?" "Yes," she said. "A voice that can't be ignored." He frowned. "That sounds like a performance." "It is," she agreed. He leaned forward. Do you know anyone who thinks like that? She met his eyes again. I know many people who want to be remembered, she said. This city is full of them. Does that include you? A small smile curved her lips. Maybe. That smile bothered him. Not because it was suspicious, because it was beautiful. It made him forget for a moment that he was questioning her, and that was dangerous. So he forced himself to look away. At her table, at the books, and then at the wet fingerprint again. Still there, still faint. Agneyi, he said quietly. Why is this book wet only on the inside, not the cover? She didn't look at the book. She looked at him. And for the first time something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but a kind of tired honesty. The window leaks, she said softly. The wind blew it open last night. Rain fell on the table. Truth, lie, half-truth? Hard to tell. He stood and walked to the window. He touched the latch. It wasn't loose. It held firm. Strange, he said. The latch is tight, hard for wind to open. She joined him by the window, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. Some things open even when they shouldn't, she said softly. He glanced at her profile, the curve of her cheek, the slight shadow under her eye, the faint smell of smoke and jasmine in her hair. For a split second he forgot the painting. He forgot the crime. He forgot the fingerprint. He only saw her. And that was when I smiled. Humans never see the moment they lose balance. But I do. The turning point. He stepped away. Distance. He needed distance. She didn't move. She didn't fill the silence. She waited. He forced himself to speak. The painting, did you know it had hidden layers beneath the surface? Her eyes widened slightly, just slightly, but Varaha caught it. Yes, she said, then added, only a few people know that. How do you know? She looked down at her hands. Her fingers brushed against a chess pawn on the table. I read about it once. The painter hid a sketch beneath the final layer, a woman's face. The same woman? No, she said softly. Someone else, someone he loved more than the rain. Varaha leaned forward. Who told you this? She hesitated, longer this time. Then she whispered, someone who told me stories and then vanished. Who? A friend. Name? She shook her head. Slow, deliberate. I can't. And that was the first real crack in her calm. A crack Varaha noticed immediately. He stood. You're hiding something. I'm protecting someone. Why? Because not everything is meant to be found, detective. He exhaled long and steady. This woman, this quiet, balanced woman, was suddenly a tangle of truths and shadows, and he was being pulled into that tangle whether he wanted to or not. This is how it begins. A detective thinks he came for facts. A woman thinks she is only protecting a truth, but beneath their words, beneath their silences, beneath their breath, a thin, bright thread begins to weave them together. Intimacy always begins with a question. Always. The small gift Varaha walked to the door. I'll have to talk to you again, he said. I know. You're still a suspect, she nodded. No one is innocent in stories like this. He paused, and she said, wait. She walked to the chessboard and picked up one piece, the Black Knight. She placed it in his hand. Why give me this, he asked. Because, she said, every chase begins with the first move. He looked down at the chess piece. Smooth, solid, meaningful. A clue? A game? A warning? He couldn't tell. He looked up, but she had already stepped back from him, back into the shadows of her room, as if the light didn't know how to hold her. He left without another word. And as he descended the stairs, the knight heavy in his palm, a single thought followed him. She knows something, and she's not afraid of me, which meant he should be afraid of her. But he wasn't, not even a little. And that was the first danger.